first roundtable is a producer roundtable, and I'm very happy to introduce just briefly our panelists, and then I'll give each of them the opportunity to give you more information about them, their particular role in the organic dairy industry, and then we'll move into a series of questions that I've prepared for them. And if we have an opportunity at the end of that time for questions from the larger group, then we'll do that. So first of all, producer roundtable participants are Kathy Arnold. She's a organic dairy farmer from New York State. Robert Kercher from Oregon, who's also an organic dairy farmer. Faye Benson with Cornell University. He's an extension associate who works closely with the organic dairy industry. And then Michaela Hanselman, who is a Cornell alum and also currently works for the National Milk Producers Federation. So I'm going to ask each of you to give a brief introduction to yourself and your role, starting with Kathy.
Hi, thanks for having me today. We've been shipping organic milk at Twin Oaks Dairy for 23 years now. I think we were the first bovine organic dairy in the county. We did have a sheep dairy that beat us. But we have currently a herd of about 160 cows and about 75% of that in young stock, and crop and graze around 800 some acres of owned and rented. So I also have been very involved in the Northeast Organic Dairy Producers Alliance, the acronym NODPA, since its inception in the early 2000s. It's an organic dairy farmer advocacy and education organization. And we also have a sister organization, WADPA, in the Western US. And I guess we can go on to the next.
Wonderful. Robert, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Robert Kercher, a dairy farmer in Dayton, Oregon. We milk organic cows on 2 locations. And the Northwest is a pretty good place to dairy. I mean, we get a lot of rainfall in the wintertime. Our summers towards August can get pretty hot, but we've got irrigation on all of our pastures, so water's pretty important. Yeah.
Wonderful. Faye, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Faye Benson. I'm located here in Central New York. I've worked with the Cooperative Extension the last 17 years. But before that, I was 20 years as a dairy farmer. I started shipping about the same time as Kathy Arnold in the organic market, and did that for about 7 years before taking this work with Cooperative Extension. I work mainly with organic and organic dairy as my focus work.
Great. And Michaela?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michaela Hanselman. I work for the National Milk Producers Federation on the regulatory team. For those that don't know, NMPF represents dairy cooperatives on policy and regulatory issues at the federal level. So some of our cooperatives also have organic members, which is how we touch on the organic industry. And I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you all. I'm so excited to have each one of you. So like I said, I'm going to ask a series of questions that will hopefully get us thinking about some of the challenges and opportunities. And I'd love to hear from each one of you about your thoughts on these questions. And so the first one is, based on your experience with the dairy industry, the organic dairy industry, a lot of you have been in the organic dairy industry for quite some time. What advice would you give to a producer who's thinking about switching over, given, sort of the environment that we're in right now and what opportunities lie ahead? We have producers who want to get certified, as Sarah pointed out. And so what advice would you give them as they move forward into their entry into the organic dairy industry?
15 years ago, I would not have had this at the top of the list, but at this point in time, it's essential that any producer find a market and have a signed marketing agreement before they start the expense and work of an organic transition. I would assume anybody, or would hope that anybody planning to transition to organic already has been grazing, but if not, it's essential that they learn the art of grazing and get a grazing infrastructure in place, and also learn alternative healthcare treatments. And number one along that line is to put systems in place to prevent as much treatment as possible, because that preventing medical issues is the sort of number one goal of healthcare in organic production.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's been a lot of talk this morning about sort of getting ahead of mastitis in particular, so that we can understand how to prevent having to treat. Robert, Faye, I think Faye's unmuted, so it sounds like he's going to jump in here.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were being called on or. So yeah, I guess diversify is something I'm seeing a number of farmers take on. That one of the opportunities of a small dairy is that you can expand on what you're doing. You don't, if you're committed to a 500 cow farm, that's pretty much what you have to do. But if you, being a smaller dairy, you can maybe like do some custom work for somebody else. If you buy a piece of equipment, maybe you can sell milk and have somebody else process it, and you can market it. I mean, there's just a lot of different things you can do to diversify your income stream. One of the programs I work is the Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship Program here in New York, which is a organization that has about 11 states in the Great Lakes region, and working with grazing dairies. And so we see a lot of small farmers are getting more into direct marketing as a way to, improve their bottom line. So I mean, just, think about other ways than just producing milk.
Robert, did you have anything to add there?
I guess here in the Northwest, I mean, as far as getting into organics, I mean, in the Northwest and even into California, there's not a whole lot of smaller conventional farms left. They've all been kind of pushed out by the market. And so I guess just in our region, I don't see a whole lot of potential for other farms to transition to organic, I guess.
That's really good insight, and kind of moves nicely into my next question, which would be, what are the key challenges facing organic dairy producers today, folks who are already certified organic? Kathy, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Well, lack of markets is a huge challenge. And although Sarah was correct that in the last 2 or 3 years, we have not seen a pay decline, or pay price has been steady. Back in 2017 and early 2018, virtually across the board, I believe, we all suffered a substantial decline in pay price. And a lot of that was due to there had been a deficit of organic milk, and then all of a sudden there was a surplus, and the industry was swimming in milk, and the response was to cut pay prices. And another challenge is, at least here in New York, some producers have received termination notices and have had no alternative markets come available. So, that loss in pay price and the quota that has been put on by some milk buyers has been negatively affecting the bottom line of, numerous farms. So they're, in financial stress, and perhaps, as Sarah said, no longer able at this time to as easily bring on the next generation. I would say that's the key challenges. I guess one other challenge that I see is on the regulatory side. And the biggest one, I'd say there's two: enforcement of the pasture standard and the origin of livestock for organic dairy. That last one is something that the National Organic Program has been working on, and producers have been advocating for a change and tightening of the rules for at least 10 years. And rules have been proposed and then they've been pulled, but the current situation is that some certifiers allow continuous transition of conventional livestock on existing farms. So that's mostly happening in probably the midsection of the country from Texas on up through Colorado and so on. So these farms can just ramp up their production very rapidly. And I believe that is what caused the surplus of organic milk 3 years ago. And that's also most likely why we have no premium, no good market for organic heifers and calves, is because if farms that are expanding can just buy conventional animals, yearlings, and then transition them to organic in 1 year, why pay a premium for organic animals that were organic from the last third of gestation?
Robert, do you have anything to add to what Kathy noted for challenges?
I think with Kathy talking about the origin of livestock, it does seem like our market is starting to turn around. There seems to be more of a demand for organic milk, but with more certifiers, especially in our area too, there's one bigger conventional dairy that's starting an organic dairy, and he's been outsourcing all organic cattle, but there's not very many more organic cattle available in our area, which is kind of a good sign too, that maybe we won't get flooded as quickly, but still, like Kathy said, we need a level playing field across the board. I mean, if the certain areas in the Midwest are able to transition heifers, I mean, there's no stopping that. So, and that's what led us into this problem we're in, that we've been suffering through for the last 3 years. So, but anyways, I think we're headed the right direction, but I don't know why NOP can't get something figured out.
Thanks, Robert. And Faye, do you have anything to add to that?
I guess I'd go along, I just want to be sure I go along with what's already been said about the origin of livestock. I think that's one that really changed the industry a lot. And it was caused because of conventional milk being so low priced during that period of time. Farmers that never even bothered think about that expensive move to transition a herd, they said, okay, well, let's go ahead. It looks like the conventional is not working for us. So we had a number of these large dairies, and their model is to feed a fair amount of grain and less forage, where our model here in the Northeast has been focused on forage production. So our cows, they may not produce as much, but they last longer. But under the grain feeding, where you're high grain feeding leads to higher turnover. So if you have easy access to young stock to replace those ones as the other ones are transitioned out of the organic herd, it makes their system work. So we really need to, put the stop to this two roles. That origin of livestock really needs to be strengthened. The $38 probably in 2016 was the average pay price to farmers. And now it's $32 a hundredweight, 15% drop in income while cost of production has gone up. And I just wanted to touch the question earlier about what we're seeing of farmers drop out of the industry. I think a fair amount of what I've seen is farmers that were close to retirement age. that there was, it's fun to make milk when you're making a lot good money. And a lot of farmers made really good money at $38 a hundredweight, and they can still make it. I have two farmers near me that both retired. They were still making money, but it just wasn't as much fun to make, $6 less a hundredweight. So they, a number of farmers are opting to, retire out of dairy farming now, and we really will need new dairy farmers to replace them eventually.
Michaela, yeah, go ahead.
So coming from this more of at an external angle, I think two issues that producers, both conventional and organic, are dealing with is competition from plant-based alternatives, because they are breaking into our marketplace. And while I would say their products are inferior to organic and conventional dairy products, consumers are buying them. And then on the other hand, animal activism is always going to be an issue for anyone working with animals, especially the dairy industry. It feels as of late has been being hit more. We're lucky to have things like the farm program, so we have those animal welfare standards in place, but there's always going to be a bad actor, and it seems like they're able to find that bad actor in the industry. So I think those are both challenges that producers are having to deal with, unfortunately.
Yeah, certainly. So it sounds like a lot of the same issues. We have, fairly diverse group here to represent different areas. So I guess with all of those challenges, I'd love to hear from the panel about what resources, what tools do organic producers need to be successful, to improve their operations. And then, sort of also in that realm, what kind of research do you see? And we might have touched on that some this morning with Steve, but what sort of research do you see as necessary to move forward and be successful? And before you answer, I would remind the participants that you can go ahead and put questions in the chat box, and if we as you think of them, and if we get to them, we'll make sure to ask them. But I'll start with Kathy. Kathy, what tools, resources, what research do you see, workshops, trainings that need to be targeted toward organic producers that would help the industry overall?
Well, the first thing I'd like to point out is I would love to see veterinary schools include courses on organic production, and that more veterinarians come out of school supportive of organic and not dismissive, and have a better understanding of our production systems and the fact that, our cows can do very well without being routinely treated with antibiotics, and whether it's dry treatments or whatever. And we're very fortunate that we work with two veterinarians that are supportive, and they can do diagnostics, but they don't, in most cases, give us a treatment plan. So we have to know that ourselves. So it'd be great to have more veterinarians that actually have experience and knowledge of organically certifiable treatments. The other thing that is somewhat different in organic dairy than conventional is that I think not all, but most buyers pay substantial premiums for low somatic cell count milk. I know our cooperative pays $3 per hundredweight if we have 100,000 or less, along with, commensurately low bacteria count. And so I think that is a place where more energy and workshops and training could happen to help organic producers harvest those quality premiums. It takes a lot of work, and we don't always make the 100,000 or less, but it sure helps the bottom line the many months when we can.
Robert, from your perspective, where do you see needs for resources, tools, research, training?
I think Kathy kind of hit most of the really good points, but a good veterinary assistance is really helpful. We've been pretty fortunate to have a pretty good vet clinic nearby us that's taught us a lot of different methods, such as, calves with scours. We're all Jerseys. Jersey calves can be very challenging to raise, but we've learned a lot of different techniques and tricks, just hydration with lactated ringers and so on and so forth. It's made a huge difference in our system. But if that could be shared amongst more organic producers in some way or another, I think that would be a big benefit to everybody, especially on the animal welfare side of trying to keep these animals alive and so on and so forth. There's a lot in genetics too, especially with life traits. Also, we've been organic since 1996, being a closed herd all this time, and we feel pretty strongly that a lot of our weaker, say, life trait genetics have kind of been weeded out of the herd naturally, and thus we've got a stronger immune system, traits, so on and so forth. And I think Organic Valley's been doing some videos of on different farms with some of their vets and stuff that anybody can chime into to watch and see what different farmers are doing that's being successful or not for raising calves or different practices, grazing practices, and so on and so forth, which is very educational, I think, and can help a lot of different farmers.
Well, that's a really good point about the sort of educational videos. And I just have a follow-up question on that while you're on that topic. Do you find that videos are a good way of reaching different producers? And would you suggest any other opportunities that could be used to reach organic producers other than videos?
Well, considering the pandemic and stuff, we're kind of just stuck with videos, but doing I think OV would call them like an on-farm discovery or something like that, but being able to go to another farmer's operation and just seeing in real time, how they do, calf care or different milking procedures or whatever it is, to be on the farm and talking to other producers and then letting them explain, hey, this is why we do this and this is the results of this, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Faye, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I just really want to think it's been wonderful to see like the OREI, the Organic Research Extension Initiative, got started, and it's caused interest in academia and research to be focused on organic, because when we first got into the organic market back in the late 90s, we were not a very well accepted among the animal science people. I mean, I still have an office on in Morrison Hall at Cornell, and I've always kept a very, I keep my head down. I don't say much to people because organic wasn't well accepted in the beginning, and probably for some good reasons sometimes that. But I think now that we've been around a long time, the industry's matured, and so to have academia and research being focused on organic, it's really kind of helped bring up the image of the whole industry. And also, I mean, like the project like this one here with the spore formers, I mean, up till now, I mean, most organic milk has been consumed as fluid. The hard products, the, powdering some of the milk, for export or for baking or other products. I think that's a whole market that still can be expanded on in organic. And so we need this type of research to move the industry forward. Oh, and I guess one last thing I think is a key piece. When I started, I participated in the Dairy Farm Business Summary at Cornell, and it's a yearly snapshot of your farm, your production, your yields, your profits, and not only could you compare yourself from year to year, you compared yourself to other farmers that were similar. And in 2000, they did have an organic DFBS in 2008, 2011, but then we found that farmers were making, a lot of them said, we're making really good money and we really don't want to share that information with our processors, how profitable it's been. And it's true. I mean, there was 20 years of, same as or increasing prices for organic milk. And that's a really long time to have increasing prices. And now with this downturn, there's farmers that are starting to say, we got to pay attention to our pennies. And so we're seeing an uptick in the dairy farm business summary. And we're hoping we can get that summary published again so that farmers can use it to, see how they're doing compared to other organic farmers.
That's really great, Faye. Would you be willing to put a link to how people could get more information on the DFBS if they're wanting to participate, or your contact information so people can reach out to you to get more information? Maybe in the chat. Oh, Faye, you're on mute.
Pardon. I think the simplest way is to contact your local extension. I mean, that's what Cornell has, the dairy farm business summary, but other states have really good business summaries too. So contact your local extension office and ask for a dairy business management specialist, because they're the ones that really have to work with you to fill it out. So a local contact is what you really need.
Wonderful, thanks. Michaela, what do you see as the resources and tools that organic producers need? And you bring a unique perspective on, some of the regulatory side. Where do you see the needs here?
Well, I think as we discussed in the previous presentation, innovation, research on innovation and products is huge, especially with all these new products coming to market. Being able to compete with those is so important. Also, I think coming up, especially in the new administration, there'll be more of an environmental focus, which I think provides a really great opportunity for dairy, especially I think carbon markets might be a big thing, which would be a great resource for dairy farms. Also, as was mentioned before, I think just having any tool available for, especially for new farmers coming in, that answers the questions that you wouldn't normally think of. Like, there's tools to help you transition, but once you're actually farming, it's like there's things that come up that you're doing and you're like, what am I supposed to do during this? Also, another one that I know National Milk worked really hard on is the dairy margin coverage program that came out with the last farm bill. And that's like an insurance program for farmers. I don't know how many organic farmers actually use that program, but it's there to help if farmers need it. So I think different programs like that are all very important.
Thank you. So we're coming right down to the end of our time. If anybody has a burning question for our panel, I wanted to make sure we had a couple of minutes left so they could address it. Or if anyone on the panel has any last thoughts that would be important to throw into the ring before we take a break, this would be a great time to do it. Kathy, did you have something?
Yeah, I didn't mention it in my answer to the former, but any more research on treating and managing mastitis under organic conditions is most welcome. Although, we are able to keep a low somatic cell count, maybe once in a while we might have a 150. It's still our biggest challenge is it's an ongoing, we always have to be on top of it. And so anything, any research efforts and so on in that regard would be most welcome.
Wonderful.
Nicole, could I just, one thing, Kathy reminded me of an idea I had when you're looking for new topics to be studied. And one of the things about organic dairy is you're really focused on animal comfort to relieve stress, and that's how they remain healthy. It's preventative rather than the quick fixes of medicines. So something that would help us to measure stress levels of cows, whether it's hormones or body language, anything along that line that would help farmers address and keep track of their animal comfort level.
Yeah, that's great. So Martin would like to hear your feedback on, if there's any, from your perspective as producers or those who work with producers, if you're aware of any, sort of efforts toward increasing production or processing of organic powders that could be used for ingredients or specifically for the export market.
Well, I mean, I think you have coming up on your afternoon schedules. Do you have a speaker that's from Cuga Milk's powder plant? I was really excited to hear that. I mean, so I don't know if he's in the audience now or not.
I don't think he's with us
I am
quite
here.
yet. Oh, wonderful. Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll let you address that then during the roundtable for the processors. We do have, I think, one last question. John asks about any comments from the panel on issues related to housing. He said that we've been fortunate to have an ongoing study on housing and mastitis. So issues related to housing, if anyone on the producer panel has a comment on that.
Well, I just have to say that I think really it's time to get rid of stanchions in barns. I mean, that may not be a favorable one to have, but just in my opinion, it's time to get rid of stanchions.
I guess I would just say that, yeah, certainly we believe there's a connection between cleanliness of stalls and incidence of mastitis. So that is, an ongoing focus of ours. And one thing that we deal with an organic herd that's more forage based, and we try to put in top-notch haylage and graze when the pastures are at an ideal stage, is we end up dealing with loose manure, and it's much more difficult to keep stalls clean, to keep the parlor clean when under those conditions. So the last couple of years we've actually now that we have a new barn with free stalls, we have added corn silage to the ration because that does tend to tighten the cows up. And we've also experimented with straw in the ration. But this is one kind of management thing that we've been struggling with, how to make the manure a little stiffer so it's less of a challenging situation for causing mastitis.
Yeah, that's great. We know that manure management's really important for quality factors as well. So that's a great one to hear, Kathy. Thanks for adding that. So just real quickly before we take our break, so there was a couple of more questions, but I'm gonna ask these folks to maybe reach out to panel members directly with additional questions.